And welcome to Understanding Photography with Kim Ayres, episode 295. Today is the ICM challenge, the Intentional Camera Movement challenge. So we've had all sorts of images in, from multiple exposure being slightly moved to sweeping vistas, moving the camera sideways, right through to kind of zoom in out as well. So there's been lots of entries. We've had, well, about 9 different entries into the Intentional Camera Movement Challenge. So if you're watching live, leave a comment, let me know you're here, and we can make a start. If you're watching the recorded version from about a few hours after this has gone out live, you should find down below a very detailed breakdown menu version, so you can move on to the little bits that you would like to. Yeah, that's stick around and we can make a start. So yes, welcome to Understanding Photography with Kim Ayres, episode 295. So today is the Intentional Camera Movement Challenge. And so 3 weeks ago, in fact, I talked all about intentional camera movement. So if you go back to episode 293, you will find I've got an in-depth exploring all sorts of different ideas with what you can do with it. And then I set a challenge, and we've had several people put in for that. Like I say, if you happen to be watching live, you can leave a comment. I see we've got a few in already. Gunilla says, hi from Roland. Thunderstorm in the distance. Hope it doesn't come above me. Lisa says, hello from the bowels of Hades. Hot Maryland. That sounds hot, Lisa. April says, greetings from a cloudy Long Island, New York. The heat wave broke, finally, and a more normal New York summer temperature today. Susan says, hi from a very dull, very unsummery day in Kakubri. Roll on summer. I love a thunderstorm, Gunilla. Well, oddly, was it about a week ago or something? About 1 o'clock in the morning, there was this incredible kind of flashing of lights of a lightning storm going on in the distance out the back window. I sort of, though it was too far away to actually hear any thunder, but every few seconds the sky was lighting up. It was really quite incredible. Did enjoy that. Wouldn't have liked to have been directly underneath it, and I did make sure that I'd unplugged all the routers and the TV and everything before I came to bed. What else have we got? Janet says, hi from a slightly cooler Mississauga, high of only 27. We have been mostly up in the mid-30s during the week, and humidexes mostly in the mid-40s up to 49°C. That sounds incredible. That's India temperatures. I mean, even Viji would be getting hot at that, I think. Susan says she slept through that lightning storm. Like I say, if you're watching live now, one of the things you can do is click the like button. That's always a kind of useful thing for the algorithms. If people who are generally watching it live go, oh yes, we're live, we're sticking around, and they click the like, then sometimes YouTube likes to sort of show it to a few other people, and occasionally we get new people joining this wonderful group of ours. What else? Marilyn joins us from a sunny Colorado. John says, good day from Ohio. And Sandy says, good morning, everyone, from a sunny Alberta. Thunderstorm scheduled for later today. All right, so obviously Sandra and Janet are in very different parts of Canada with different weather. It's one of those things. I did spend a year in Canada on a student exchange 35 plus years ago or something, and it's one country, but it's one country that's 3,500-4,000 miles across, and I was in Nova Scotia, and I remember kind of it being a bit strange that there were people at the university I was at who were from British Columbia, who were as far from home as I was, even though I had the Atlantic between me and the UK. Big place, lots of weather. Different weather. If you want a different kind of weather, just go to a different spot in Canada. You will find something. Janet says, I think it's a 4-hour flight to Calgary, if I remember correctly. Whereas in Britain, you can never be further than about 800 miles from somebody else. If you're like right down in Cornwall at one end and kind of up in the Shetlands at the other, that's about as far as it goes. Right, where are we? I'm waffling. Let's make a start. So today then, yes, is the Intentional Camera Movement Challenge. So 3 weeks ago, I talked in depth about the intentional camera movement, and we sort of set I think it was Janet's idea, and we set it up and talked all about it, and I set the challenge. And since then, we've had 9 people send in their images for today. So we're going to go through the images, we're going to take a look at them, and hopefully we're going to kind of become a little bit inspired by what everybody else was up to. We can have some ideas to try out ourselves. Oh, Roland's joined us too. It says, hi everyone, welcome Roland. Right, so a little bit of tidying up the desktop, and we can make a start. So what I will do is, let's flick over here and move that to there, and that to there, and then finally that to there. And hopefully you should be seeing Sandy's picture here. So Sandy said, oh my goodness, ICM is so addicting and fun. What a great start. I had a hard time picking one, as they're all so different. Some nature, some street, some very colourful abstracts. I love lots of colour, but I settled on this one. It is shot with my phone, using intentional camera movement and double exposure. The opportunities in this challenge are endless. Looking forward to seeing what all the gang come up with. So, great start, I thought. So this one then, what Sandy is doing, she's using the intentional camera movement. So she's got her phone, but multiple exposure. So she's sort of going click and moving the camera, going click and click and click and click, and then they are getting overlaid, all slightly out of sync with each other. And it does create quite a painterly feel, quite a kind of slightly abstracty kind of. We're looking at a flower. From here, looks much like a daisy, quite close up. I say it's almost, but it's almost sort of pencils, coloured pencils, I think, rather than, certainly not kind of photography as your first thought. And that's part of the fun, I think, of this kind of thing with intentional camera movement. You move away from that idea of the direct representational, that it's not directly just a documented photo. You are getting creative with it. Viji's joined us, says, good evening, friends from a humid Chennai. And she says, oh, wow, painterly, in response to Sandy. Lisa says, nice one, Sandy. Marilyn says, lovely. Susan says, lovely image, Sandy. April says, very pretty shot. And John says, really nice, Sandy. So, great shot there, Sandy. And I thought it was a really good way to just sort of kick off proceedings and sort of see how this was going to go. Next up, then, is Janet. I didn't decide to consciously start with the Canadians, just pure coincidence. But Janet did this one. Now, Janet said this was shot in Algonquin. I've got no idea how you pronounce it. But anyway, Algonquin Provincial Park in the winter a few years ago. I was looking up at the tree and shooting in a circle, making myself dizzy in the process. And that's what a great idea. I really love this one. April says, I feel dizzy. Completely. But but what's really good here, actually, I think what I like about what Janet's done here is by focusing on the top part of the tree here, we can see this bit here is relatively still, so the center point of it is, and that's kind of allowed her to sort of rotate as she's sort of looking up. But all that rotation blur that we've got going around the edges just focuses your eye right into the center of the tree, and it follows that line of the trunk up as well. So, in that sense, your eye is just kind of getting drawn into that center part, all of the storm really of it. Nicely done there, Janet. I think it's got a good use of the idea of doing intentional camera movement. Susan says, really like the focus bit in the middle. Janet. Roland says, nice, I like that. Marilyn says, well done. Janet says, thanks. Yes, now, next up then we go to Gunilla. And Gunilla was having fun. She said, let's fling this one over. She said, it was a very fun challenge and I learned how to use my camera's double exposure. Now, I must admit, actually, I will also say at this point that I love this. I really love the fact that some of you have kind of got into it. This has become a new topic, something that maybe either you haven't done before, you haven't done much before, haven't really explored before, but you've taken what we talked about a few weeks ago and gone out and experimented and tried things out. And that works really well. Now, what Gunilla has done, she says, it was a very fun challenge. I learned how to use my camera's double exposure. I've taken many photos since the announcement of the ICM theme. Then I processed the picture I chose in Photoshop and completely altered the colours in the challenge picture. Hope that was allowed. And of course it's allowed, because this is, what we're doing here is we're creating, we're having fun. This isn't about direct representation, or we're not looking at that going, oh my goodness, that's not usually purple or whatever. So she also sent a couple of other versions to sort of show how it went. Now, she also then sent the raw file. And to just give you a kind of a brief sense of how this kind of thing is done, is that if I open this in Photoshop, and then I'll open that in RAW. So she's taken the photo, as we can see that she's got the photo here, and it's exposed really for the highlight. The lower part of this kind of is quite dark, but she's sort of done exposures and movement, and we can see, we can see that lovely kind of sweeping movement that's kind of creating this effect. Now, if we just very quickly do an auto, you can see then what the auto has done is brought down the highlights a little bit, brought up a bit of the shadows. But then what she's done is you can play around with the temperature gauge. And I mean, if we were to go auto on that doesn't really do much. But if we were to kind of shift it over to the right, we get these kind of yellows, or we could take the tint in and bring out these kind of oranges and purple, kind of magentas like that. Or we can go the other way. And, it's this kind of thing, I think, where Gunilla's gone, is where you're kind of playing around with into the blues and purples. So you can really have a lot of fun with this, just playing around with the colours. At this point, like I say, we're not talking about representation. We're going into the world of abstract. We're going into the world of creative imagery. And I've been in a few conversations of late where it appears that a lot of people, I think, have a mistaken understanding of photography as all you're doing is going click. And going click is the smallest part of photography. In fact, sometimes I've even found myself in conversation with clients saying, I do the click for free. That's not what you're paying me for. It's all the other things that go into creating a photograph. I mean, you have to line it up. You have to look. You're observing. You're deciding that this is worth photographing as opposed to that. You're deciding to frame it this way. You're deciding where are the blends, where are the lines, where are is there an interesting kind of color balance? Is there a way that your eye is being drawn into things? So there's all these different decisions you make long before you go click, to try and create something interesting. Even when you've gone click, you look in the back of the phone or the back of the camera, or check it out on the screen, and then you realize that there's other ways of doing it. Maybe it hasn't done quite what you wanted to, or you realize there's other options. So you play, you explore, you go in and you click again and you click again, and you make multiple choices, multiple decisions continually. And then you take that photo and you put it into Photoshop where you're editing. At the very least, you crop it again, or you make subtle changes. You bring out details in the shadows, or pull down more details from the highlights. Maybe you color shift. Maybe you remove items. Maybe you add items. There are all sorts of different things that you can do. The click is the smallest, tiniest part of it. So never allow anyone to make you feel slightly less than that photography is somehow a lesser art form because all you do is point the thing and go click. Because yes, anybody can go click, and well, maybe a lot of people do. I mean, certainly a lot of people, just photographing your lunch, quick coffee, and that's a different thing. A snapshot is just a form of communication, a quick thing of, hey, I was in this cafe, what a lovely chocolate brownie I had, click, shove it on social media. That's just a kind of quick hello. But when the kind of photography we're creating, where we think about it, where we're thinking about who's going to be looking at it, we're thinking about what we're trying to convey, that then is powerful creativity, which is just as creative as any other art form. At some point, I might explain to you why I'm feeling a little bit more passionate about this at the moment, but maybe that's for another day. Meanwhile, okay, so back to Gunilla. And so Gunilla's, let's just put up a photo again. This was Gunilla's photo, and I love the creativity that's gone into it. So just talking about then that idea that there is the creativity of, you know, finding the scene, moving the camera about while she's going, doing the double exposure, but then also bringing it into Photoshop and editing it and changing it until you end up with something which isn't about direct representational, it's about creating and communicating a mood or an idea and a feeling. And I think that's really important. Right. Okay, so what have we got? April says, I like the colour. Pretty. Susan says, gorgeous colours and textures. Viji says, such a beautiful shot, and she loves the purple. Lisa loves the colours too. Oh, Gord's joined us as well. Hi, Gord. Glad you could make it along. Sandy said, very moody. Love the colours and how you process this. It demonstrates why you should never throw a photo out. Sometimes you can throw a photo out, but, well, it depends, yes. Sometimes it is actually fun to just find a photo that you know doesn't work. It's a photo. It was badly cropped. It was bad, and it was, not in focus. And I can go, well, can I do anything about it? Can I be creative with it? There may be limitations. There may be limitations to how far you can get, but just the act of doing it, it can sometimes be quite good because it becomes a case of the exploration is sharpening your mind. You're creating new muscle memories. Always worth playing. Very good. Oh, Meg's joined us, says hello everyone, and a few people saying hi to Meg. Oh, Sandra's also joined us and says hi everyone from a hot and sunny Birmingham. Well, as opposed to cold and dreary Scotland. It's not that cold. I mean, I think it's still about 17 or 18 degrees, but given the fact that it is the 5th of July, it doesn't feel like summer. It does just have more of a feeling of very early spring or kind of mid-autumn, to be honest. Viji says, heard about the heat wave in Europe. Yes, but it hasn't reached Scotland. A few other people saying hi to Meg. Okay, let's move on then to Roland. Now, Roland sent in this one. What's kind of interesting about this, though, I think, is actually just the dark of the around, because Roland's picture is actually very, very panoramic, cinematic. It's kind of interesting that because it's dark above and below, actually that almost becomes part of the picture as well. Let's take that down a bit. I just want to show you if I do that. Even that's kind of still creating a frame on it. But it does give you a slightly better sense of what Roland's picture actually was. Is more like that. But having said that, it's still quite interesting. So what Roland has done then is Roland has done one of these sideways sweeps. And he says this was taken on the banks of the Thames near Dartford in Kent. So for those of you out with Britain, if you're looking at a map of Britain, look down kind of bottom right hand corner. That's where the Thames is the river that runs through London and then out past Kent into the North Sea, or the English Channel. He says, the yellow at the bottom is grass that had dried in the sun and the sky and the clouds above. I like the panoramic aspect, but I do have a very wide monitor. See, that makes a difference sometimes as well. Just your sort of sense of what kind of crop ratio that you're drawn to. I mean, I've talked before. I mean, I very much have a love for cinematic imagery, and cinematic imagery automatically creates this sort of widescreen effect. But it is true that if you've got a double monitor, or I know some people who do have these sort of extraordinarily wide monitors, and then you've just got pictures on the background, I think it sort of just starts to slightly change your general perception of what you think a crop ratio on a picture should look like, and you kind of get drawn more to that. So something like this then, not necessarily knowing exactly what it is, it could have been, it wouldn't necessarily have known that was dried grassing, making it yellow. It doesn't really matter, but what we've got is these gradations going through. I think it's the kind of thing which actually probably makes an extraordinarily good desktop background on your monitor. If you've got that, this kind of thing is what, I can easily imagine something like this with all the little symbols and tags and all the rest of it. Icons, that's the word I was looking for, icons. Scattered around it without it necessarily interfering, but just kind of humming away in the background, giving this sort of slightly kind of calming presence. So where are we? Viji says you answered my question, Kim. That'd be about the whether the heat wave had hit Scotland or not. Susan says that's a wow from me, Roland. Sandra says, I would like a bit of cold at the moment, and rain even more so. The weeds in my allotment are dying because the ground is so dry. April says, looks like an abstract painting. Marilyn says, beautifully abstract. Sandy says, so serene. Roland, I love this. Viji says, beautiful, Roland, as Sandra mentioned, quite serene. Looks like a sunflower field with a blue sky and slow shutter speed. Sandra says she likes the photo. And Roland says, yes, was my background. Right, okay. Next up then, I'm going to go to Viji. Now, this was a fun one from Viji. So, what we have here is... Marci's joined us, says good morning. Sorry, I'm late. So, Viji has sent in this image, which, again, what we've got is we've got all these squiggly lines. Including, most of them are white, but then there's a kind of bluey purple squiggly line here, and maybe little bits of colour here. And it's quite interesting because the little squiggles, are larger up at this end and then small. So you really get a sense of something moving. But what was it? Now, what Viji has done, she sent in the original or another version of the photo. And what we can see is it's a river or a bay and its reflections. And what we've got is street lights. It looks like there might be pylons or something over there, which are obviously not showing up. So it's these street lights that are then reflecting in the water down here. So that's a kind of another version of the photo. But then she put it onto long shutter speed and created this. So Viji said, I would like to submit this image for the intentional camera movement challenge. It is very interesting to see how the image turns out. I've attached the image as it is and the intentional movement one. It is more interesting because I shot these and their reflections on the water. Capture this photo through my DSLR with a longer exposure. Absolutely loved the way that it turned out. And I think that is part of it. There is, certainly play around with water and reflections. We've talked about this before already. And certainly this idea of nighttime. Nighttime allows us to get away with a longer exposure more naturally anyway. But if you've got a night scene so that any lights are kind of standing out, and then you've got a kind of patch of darkness, and you've got the reflections, there's lots of opportunity here. And what I love is in the shape of these is this just fantastic squiggle. It's a real kind of, you can imagine taking your pen and just going, just making a squiggle like that. But that squiggle has been made by the wobble, the movement of the camera. You can trace exactly how the camera's come down here, squiggled up there, done a loop, come back here, gone sideways. And, it is literally capturing the movement in time through that line. So yeah, fun. I think with this one, actually, Viji, to be honest, I think a little bit like Roland's one actually would work slightly better as a kind of wide, crop in, something like that. I think really then emphasizes the feeling. But yeah, I like that idea. So again, if we're talking about this idea of these challenges as being not just for you to have a go at, but also to see what other people have done and become inspired by what other people have done and start thinking, oh, maybe I could have a go at doing that myself. This becomes another version of that, I think. Take these ideas, take the idea, think, well, is there a river or a loch or even a puddle? A large puddle or something like that at night time with it, or cars driving past, wiggle the camera, well worth having a go at. And, along with like the enthusiasm that Sandy started this with, that there's so many options and chances to play around with this concept. Right, what have we got? Yeah, so Marci joined April says, cool reflection. Susan says, love the feeling of movement here, Viji. Would never have guessed what it was. Viji said it was a television tower rather than an electric tower in the background. Sandy says, cool abstract, Viji. Lisa says, very interesting photo. And Sandra says, unusual. Right. So, yes, at this point then, just a little reminder that if you find these podcasts useful, interesting, entertaining even, and would like to support them, then buymeacoffee.com/Kim Ayres is one of the ways you can do it. Another thing I would like to remind you of is the Substack newsletter. For those of you who haven't signed up yet, Kim Ayres photography.substack.com is so social media isn't really showing my posts to many people. It's designed not to unless I give them lots of money. So I'm kind of trying to build the community off social media. And the Substack newsletter is one of the ways I will be doing that, just like the podcast is. But at the same time, I still need social media to let people know it's there. But I'm not... Social media, interestingly, Maggie and I were having a conversation over coffee this morning about the idea that social media, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter or Blue Sky or anything else, isn't a relationship. And it doesn't build a relationship. It reminds you that a relationship is possible elsewhere. The best social media is all it's doing is really, it's like the equivalent of a wave across the, you're walking down the road and somebody waves and you go, hi, see, or you bump somebody into somebody you know in the street very briefly and it's, oh, what are you up to? Oh, it's just at this cafe, had a lovely cup of tea. I'll catch you later, right? It's moments in time. That's not where the relationship is. That's just a little reminder that you have a relationship with this person and you can go elsewhere, maybe at a later date, meet up and go for a cup of tea together, have that conversation, maybe be invited to events or things like that. So the key thing here is there's these podcasts, there's the photography that I do, there's clients that I serve, there's posts, my blog or the Substack posts that I write. I'm really now starting to get into the idea of thinking about running workshops, maybe mobile phone workshops or maybe online workshops, all these kind of things. And so there becomes like a kind of entire almost ecosystem. But social media is a tiny bit of that. That's not where the relationship is. The relationship is away from social media. And so to come back to this notion then of the Substack then becomes a place where if I put out a post, I know the people who signed up for it are going to get it. Whereas if I put up a post on Instagram or I put up a post on Facebook, I've got no idea whether anybody's going to see it. So if you sign up to it, you know you're going to get it. Even if you this month you don't feel you've got time to read it or whatever, at least at that point you do get a ping, a pop-up in your email box and you go, oh yeah, Kim, I'll come back to that later. And maybe it's a couple of months before you do. But there's the possibility, that bit you really are reminded because there is content where we then build the relationship. Does all that make sense? Am I waffling? I'll move on. Other little reminder is the kimayres@gmail.com. Sorry, kimayrespodcast@gmail.com is the place to send your images if you would like to be involved in the next challenge. Or you would like to stick in images for a feedback session. Next week will be a feedback session. No, it won't. Sorry, 2 weeks' time will be a feedback session. I'll come on to that. Oh, well, I suppose a quick update then on the Smug Points. And so, yes, everything kind of got bumped forward because I wasn't doing it last week. Last week I was giving a talk. No, I wasn't giving a talk. I was judging at the Dumfries and Galloway Fine Arts Society summer exhibition. So I'm currently writing a bit more to, in fact, go in the Substack newsletter. So if you sign up to that, you can find out more about that. I'll go into more detail about that in the newsletter. But what that meant, though, that was a bit last minute. And so this podcast, which should have been last week, now this week. But that means that when I added up the Smug Points for June, we got to Gunilla had got 65 Smug Points, Janet had 40 and Viji had 35, which means Gunilla was the winner of the June Smug Points. So she's got to choose the topic for this month, for the rest of this month, and I'll come on to that at the end of this podcast. So don't run away, stick around. Or if for any reason you do have to leave early, come back. And again, within a couple of hours of this, there'll be a detailed breakdown of the menu down below. And then you can find out what's coming up at this month. So we'll talk about that in a little bit. Where have we got? Oh, Meg and Viji chatting away. Oh, April says that sounds like fun, Kim. Okay. So let us move on. And next up then, we're going to go to Marilyn. Now, not that one. That one, yes. Now, so Marilyn was out in the garden. Now, interestingly, Marilyn sent me a photo fairly soon after I announced it. But then because we had a sort of shuffle forward, so this is 3 weeks rather than 2 weeks from the podcast about intentional camera movement, Marilyn said, "Oh, do you mind if I swap one over?" And I think one or two other people did this as well. But anyway, so Marilyn said, since we've had more time to play with this, please swap my entry with the attached. It's a cluster of blooming lavender with early morning light, creating some interesting shadows and colours. And this is great. This is that idea, your beautiful colour combination of the purples and greens. So out into the garden, you don't have to travel to the far ends of the earth to find something, just into the garden, a slight kind of movement. And we can see here that it sort of moves off to the left a bit, it kind of moves over. And, we've got these lovely kind of streaks and patterns and what have you. So, yeah, very nicely done, kind of nice warm colour, cool colours really. But, yes, works well, I think. What do we say? Gunilla says, I can't write English fast, so that's why I don't comment very much, but I do understand it all. Well, that's good to know. Roland says, wow. Meg says, absolutely spectacular. April says, pretty in purple. Lisa says, a classic, well done. Sandra says, lovely photo. Viji says, this is such a pretty photograph. Susan says, fabulous colours, Marilyn. Think you got the movement just right. Sandy says, gorgeous colours. And Marilyn says, thank you to everyone. Okay, next up then, we're going to go to Susan. Now, Susan, playing around with her still life way of doing things, says, this image is a flower taken from a friend's garden. Not sure of its name. It was taken indoors, but I have to admit it is from my archive. So I had to take a look back at the details. It was taken with a 60mm macro lens with a shutter speed of 1 second, f5.6 ISO 200. I don't know if it took many attempts at getting the flow right, but I like the changes. With many changes to my settings until I got something I liked. I wanted the flower to be fairly obvious to the viewer, but then for it to blend away into a soft abstract look. It took a bit of tweaking in Photoshop, mainly colour adjustments. And so, yes, so this is one of those then where it's about, you've got the, do we have any details on that? Yes, yeah, that's right. So 1 second. And 1 second is long enough for you to be able to go click and then move and sort of pause for a moment before you move. And even in this case, it looks like a sort of click, pause, swoop, pause, swoop. So there's a oomph, oomph, kind of within that 1 second frame. And so that allows, that looks like, possibly half of that second or more was taken, keeping it relatively steady so that the flower still has a fair amount of detail. And then within that, we can see, if we think of like the head of the flower, we can see it sort of starting to appear here and then down here again. And so, yeah, this is the kind of thing which is going to take several attempts before you get it right. But it does create this, it's not the complete abstract. We can tell that it's a flower. It's not maybe like Marilyn's or Viji's, where we've got the shapes, but we don't know what the origin was. We can see the origin here, but but what's happening here is we're creating these beautiful echoes and streams that are coming out of it as well. And it is the kind of thing you will do again and again and again and again. Every single time you do it will be different. And sometimes it will start off, maybe you get lucky first time, maybe you don't, and maybe it takes quite a lot of attempts before you eventually get the kind of thing where you go, oh, okay, that's worth taking in, and now tweaking with the colours or the lightness or darkening down the backgrounds, emphasising some of the shadows. or lines. So yeah, a lot of work going into that. Really beautiful there, Susan. That yellow, very kind of vibrant against the black. So what have we got? Roland says that's great. Marilyn says wonderful image. Viji says that trail is spectacular. Every photograph today so far is a Smug Point winner. It's going to be very difficult to choose. John says, very nice, Susan. Sandra says, very interesting photo. Lisa says, great idea using still life, especially in the heat wave. Yeah, and that is that is one of those things, is that, you know, the still life is an option, you know, or for that matter, you know, fill a sink with water. You know, float a couple of petals on it. You know, you don't have to go outside. You don't have to go off to places. This kind of intentional camera movement can happen. Absolutely. You can have it, do it in the house. You can do it in the garden. You can go down the street. You could even, I did wonder whether anybody might have a go at doing portraiture with it, because that's another thing you can do, moving the camera about and get some really interesting effects as well. April says, very creative shot. Sandy says, a great movement flow. I love how the flower is in focus. Roland says, wonder how much lens or camera stabilization contributes. Well, maybe that's a good point, actually, because a lot of if you've got a DSLR or mirrorless, a lot of modern cameras and lenses, especially the more expensive lenses, have image stabilization built into the lens. Some of them have it built into the camera as well, precisely to kind of stop too much wobble, or to help you get past blurred images. So that might mean that either you switch off the image stabilization, or maybe you have to go for longer exposures in order to get the effect that you want. You know, as I explored 3 weeks ago, sometimes trying to do it depending on your mobile phone. Now, Sandy managed to do some quite interesting things with a mobile phone with double exposures and movement. My phone wasn't allowing for that, and even when I was kind of shaking it quite violently in front of the scene, it was still snapping it and holding it in place. So yeah, sometimes these kind of really strongly built-in image stabilizations can in fact go against you when you want to try and do intentional camera movement. Susan says, patience is my middle name. Susan Patience, hello. Jomi X joins us, says, I like this. Welcome, Jomi. Glad you could join us. Susan says, thanks everyone, much appreciated. Marci says, I love the yellow. And Susan says the in-camera stabilization was switched off. Okay, cool, right. So next up then, we're going to go to Brian. Now, interestingly, so this is Brian. Brian said, I know it's late and that this pic does not have much camera movement. It might not be what you're looking for. Well, it is what we're looking for. It's great. It does have the movement and it gives us a stretch. But he said he knows it's late because he actually sent it to me at about 3:30 in the afternoon last week. So if this episode had in fact gone out last week, like it was intentionally to do, then it would have been way too late to send in an image. If you're going to send in an image, whether it's for these challenges or for critique and feedback, they ideally need to be with me by Friday, Saturday morning at the absolute latest, because I have to have time to be able to put these podcasts together. But back to Ryan then. But because this was postponed, it meant that there was time for me to include it. And I like this idea. I really like this idea to go down this kind of tunnel idea. Now, I don't know exactly. It looks like some kind of, there does look like there's a roof of sorts here, but we can also see the way the light is coming in and the streams are coming in, that it looks like some kind of open-sided walkway of some kind. And we've got all the pillars coming down, but very beautifully, we've got this lovely kind of, the path goes out and into the fields beyond. So this is one of those where the basic structure of the photograph is already a strong one. That idea of looking down a tunnel and then out of the tunnel into this other world, so that the tunnel itself, the pathway itself, is actually acting as a frame, and this idea that it is leading us down. But then that kind of movement within it adds that lovely kind of extra. We get all these little echoes happening on the side and these little streaks and what have you, and it shifts it away from that, again, that direct representational, into the kind of storytelling. We're slightly off kilter. We're falling into a little bit of narrative absorption here. So kind of fun. Yeah, so nice one that, Brian. That works well. April says hi to Jomi. Roland says, thanks, Susan. Love that image. April says, I like this, Brian. Susan says, very interesting, Brian. It leads us right in beautifully. Sandy says, really love this. Viji says, good one. Light at the end of the tunnel. And Roland says, frames within frames. Absolutely, yes, frames within frames. Sandra says, dramatic. Right, excellent. Okay. And then finally, before we take the vote on it and decide who gets bonus smug points, we are on to Marci. And Marci has had fun with this one. And Marci says, here's my entry for the intentional camera movement challenge. It is a zoom shot. My photo is Jerry. He was a race car driver, but now prefers the faster pace of being a working model. So what we've got here looks like a brass elephant with a pair of sunglasses. And what Marci has done is do the zoom version of the intentional camera movement. Interesting, in the glasses we can see it looks like a light setup just reflecting there, but it really works well. Certainly the ears here I think are fantastic. You know, the way that the ears of the elephant, they have become particularly exaggerated out. That trunk coming up as well, lovely sweep of the colour of those red glasses actually really playing, and that kind of slightly greenish streak down here really setting against that kind of golden brass colour as well. But yeah, I think this was the only one where there was actually a kind of intentional camera movement with the zoom on this occasion. So again, worth trying and playing around with that one as well. So yes, brilliant. Thank you very much, Marci, for sending that in. So what have we got here? Comments. April says, lol, Marci. Sandra says, funky elephant. Lisa says, fun one. Roland says, square crop works great. And Susan says, loving Jerry, Marci. Sandy says, great pick, Marci. I love abstract and would print this. And Marci saying thank you to everyone. Right. Viji says, lovely too. So what I'm going to do now then is we're now going to come on to the viewer's choice. Okay, so there are bonus smug points to be won. Okay, so I've chosen my first, second and third to get bonus 30, 20, 10 smug points. But the viewer's choice, whoever wins the viewer's choice gets a bonus 20 smug points. Now, so what I'm going to do is you, the viewer, you all get a chance to vote on this. So I'm going to go through all the images first. I'm going to say who they are. I want you to make a mental note of who you think ought to get the bonus 20 smug points. Only one. No point in listing all 9 people because you couldn't choose and you didn't want to let anybody down. Just pick the photo that you feel most deserves the 20 bonus smug points. And then I'll go through and work out. If you give me more than one name, I'm just going to take the first one. So with that then, we're going to start with, so this was Sandy doing the flower one with a multiple exposure and movement on her phone. So if this is the one you feel deserves the most, the bonus 20 smug points, you would get ready to write Sandy. Now wait until the end before you write your next, who you're voting for. Next one is Janet. So Janet has done the tree, standing up, turning around while she's going. So that's Janet. Then we have Gunilla, who, as well as doing the camera movement, has gone in and played around with colour shifts. So that's Gunilla. Then we have Roland with his very panoramic sweep along the River Thames. That's Roland. Then we've got Viji down by the riverside with the street lights reflecting in the water as she moves that. So that's a Viji. Then we have Marilyn with her lavender in the garden, making the movements with the camera, that really strong purple and green. So that's Marilyn. Then we've got Susan doing the still life with the yellow, making sure that the picture, the flower itself is still in, but we get the echoes running off. That's Susan. And we've got Brian looking down the tunnel. and to the green spot at the end and making movement with that. So that's Brian. And then finally we have Marci doing the with Jerry the elephant, the brass elephant, and the zoom in and out. So start plonking your name, who you think ought to get the bonus 20 smug points for this. Now, everybody who has put an image in automatically gets a bonus 10 smug points. You get 10 smug points for entering. You also get 5 smug points for saying hello and actually writing live into the podcast as we're going out live. So if you put one in, now this month is going to be a 2 challenge month as such, this being the first challenge. So there's lots of smug points still to be won as well. So I will, while you're working out who you're voting for, I will just let you know that so next week then, so the topic of the month, because Gunilla won, we were talking a little bit about what she would like me to do, and what she's come up with is the notion of live music, photographing live music. Okay, so whether that's going off to a concert and some big name band and you happen to be in the audience with your phone, or whether you've managed to get into a local pub or bar where there's just some local band playing, or whether you happen to be just out on the street and there's some street musicians playing around or whatever. This notion of photographing live music, how do you capture that sense of really being there where you can practically smell the sweat, so to speak? So that's what we're going to be talking about. Now, some of you with very long memories who were around 5 years ago, I did a thing on live music. That's 5 years ago. A lot of you weren't around here in these podcasts 5 years. So I'm quite happy to repeat it as a topic. So, and bring it up to date as well. So next week then is going to be all about photographing live music. The following week will be a feedback critique section. Your chance to send in an image and get direct feedback on it. And to remind you that if you want to send in an image for feedback, then Ayres podcast at gmail.com is the place to send it. If you send it to my ordinary email address, that's fine. It's just this one I have set up so that it doesn't keep filling up my inbox. And then the week after that, so the final week of July, will be the live music challenge. Now, some of you, if you don't have any live music that you can go to, might have to go and raid your archives. Maybe not everybody's going to be able to take part. Maybe someone should give Stacey a nudge, given the fact that I think her boyfriend, or now husband, I think, is in a band. I dare say she'll have some photos of him. But like I say, it could be out on the street, could be in a local pub or bar, could be at a concert hall, could be in a stadium. There's lots and lots of opportunities, but we'll talk all about that next week. Okay, right. So what have we got in terms of the votes? So votes then. So we've got one for Roland, one for Susan, one for Sandy, one for Marci, another one for Marci, another one for Susan, Marilyn. April says I have a tie, but with Brian, but we'll go with Sandy. April says I wish we get a first, second, and third. Yeah. Right. Okay. So what have we got here? We've got mostly we've got a couple for Marci. With Sandy, we've got 1, 2, I think 1, 2, 3 for Susan. 4 for. Is that 4? Yeah, 4 for Susan. Okay, Susan gets it. So Susan, you are the winner for the Intentional Camera Movement Challenge. Woohoo! Congratulations. For the crowd vote, you've got the crowd vote for this. So excellent. So what about me then? Now, I have to say, I found this extraordinarily difficult. There's merit to all of them. And part of me just wanted to give all of you extra points, except for the fact you already all get extra points. You already get 10 points for taking part. Oh, Meg's come in and said Susan as well. Susan says, yippee, thanks everyone. And Roland says, well done. So my choice, there is one of these things where I've written it down in advance because it is that kind of thing whereby practically every 5 minutes I kind of kept changing my mind. So I thought I've got to kind of sit down and pick my top 3. So my top 3 already written. I also chose Susan as the winner. So Susan, you've got the group vote and you've got mine. So between that and this, that's a bonus 50 smug points to you. So that puts you well in the front for July. Sandy was my second choice at 20 smug points, and Viji was my third at 10 smug points. I really like that notion of going and finding the river and getting the reflections. I thought it was very, very inventive. And a quick couple of commendeds. I will commend Gunilla and Marci. So Gunilla and Marci also get an extra 5 smug points bonus as well. But like I say, I could happily give out points to everybody, but hey, we draw a line somewhere. So congratulations to everybody for taking part. Comments, yeah, basically lots of people saying excellent photos and congratulations to Susan. Right, okay, so where are we at? So that then, so a little reminder that next week then I'm going to be talking about live music. The week after will be a feedback session. So if you would like feedback on your photos, you've got a photo that you don't feel is working for in whatever way, send it to me, send it to Kim Ayres podcast@gmail.com, and I will do my best to help you fix it. Or find alternative ways to approach it, edit it, whatever. And then the week after will be the live music challenge. And then we'll probably have another feedback session, I would guess. But meanwhile, actually, like I say, sign up for the Substack newsletter as well. And in fact, like I say, the fact that I was doing the judging, which is why I wasn't here last week, for the DAGFAS or Dumfries and Galloway Fine Arts Society, I'm writing a little bit about that. So if you're interested in that, you'll find that that will be put out early next week. And if you haven't done so already, do click the like button. The like's always good. It definitely helps the algorithms for the future. And if you haven't done so already, then subscribe and hit the notifications bell as well. That's everybody sort of saying congrats to everyone. And right, okay, so I think that brings us to an end. Thank you ever so much to everybody who sent in. Thank you to all of you who've taken the time to comment. Is this feedback? This is what the podcasts are all about, and it's fun. And I look forward to seeing you all next week. Take care. Bye-bye.